Hello, and welcome back to ResilientWalk. If you've found your way here today, perhaps you're carrying the weight of broken trust. Maybe someone you believed in, someone you gave your heart to, has left you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty, about goodness, about whether people can truly be who they seem to be. Before we begin our story together, if you find even a moment of peace in these words, feel free to like this video and join our quiet community by subscribing. And in the comments below, I'd love for you to share one small act of kindness you witnessed today, no matter how tiny. Sometimes, when trust feels shattered, we need gentle reminders that goodness still exists in the world. Now, settle in. Close your eyes if you'd like. Let's travel together to an ancient temple, high in the mountains, where the morning mist clings to weathered stone walls and the sound of prayer bells carries on the wind. There once lived a young man named Kael, whose hands were always stained with ink and whose eyes held the quiet fire of someone who had found his calling. For 7 years, he had served as apprentice to Master Theron, the most respected scribe in the mountain temple. Kael loved the weight of ancient books, the whisper of parchment, the way wisdom seemed to flow from the tip of his brush onto waiting pages. But more than the work itself, he treasured his mentor. Master Theron had found him as a homeless boy, had seen potential where others saw only raggedness, had taught him not just the art of writing, but the art of living with integrity. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the temple still slept, Kael would copy sacred texts by candlelight. His calligraphy was becoming exquisite, each character a small meditation, each scroll a labor of devotion. The other monks would pause to admire his work, and Master Theron would nod with what Kael believed was pride. "You have gentle hands and a pure heart," his mentor would say. "Guard both well." Kael guarded both. He guarded them with the fierce loyalty of someone who had been given a second chance at life. He never questioned why Master Theron asked him to work alone so often. He never wondered why his finished scrolls disappeared so quickly from the library. He trusted completely, the way we trust when someone has earned not just our respect, but our love. For 7 years, this was his world. The temple, the work, the man who had saved him. He believed he was exactly where he belonged. It was on a morning when cherry blossoms fell like snow outside the temple windows that Kael's world cracked open. The abbot summoned him to the great hall, where the senior monks sat in a circle, their faces grave as storm clouds. In the center of the circle lay 3 scrolls Kael recognized immediately, his own work. "Did you create these?" the abbot asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. Kael nodded, confused. These were among his finest pieces, weeks of careful work, every stroke deliberate and reverent. "Then you admit to selling sacred texts to collectors in the valley?" The words hit Kael like a physical blow. What? No. I would never." "The merchant who bought them identified you specifically. Said Master Theron sent you to make the transaction." Kael's eyes found Master Theron among the circle of monks. The man who had been his teacher, his protector, his closest thing to family, sat with his hands folded and his gaze turned downward. He did not speak. He did not meet Kael's eyes. "Master Theron." Kael's voice was barely a whisper. Silence. The evidence was overwhelming. The merchant's testimony, the missing scrolls. The detailed description of Kael could only have come from someone who knew him well. And still Kael waited for his mentor to speak, to explain, to defend him. Master Theron raised his head then, and Kael saw something in those familiar eyes that turned his blood to ice water. Not surprise, not confusion, not even sadness. Recognition. "I am sorry," Master Theron said quietly. "That one I trusted proved unworthy of that trust. The temple that had been Kael's sanctuary became his courtroom. The monks who had been his brothers became his judges. The man who had been his father became his betrayer. By sunset, Kael walked down the mountain path with nothing but the clothes on his back and a heart so broken he could barely feel it beating. 7 years of his life, 7 years of devotion and love and absolute trust gone. Not just gone, poisoned, turned into evidence of his own supposed corruption. He had been framed so perfectly, so thoroughly, that even he almost doubted his own innocence. That night, sleeping rough under a bridge in the valley town, Kael learned what it meant to be truly alone. Not just without shelter or food, but without trust itself. How do you believe in anything when the person you trusted most proves to be a lie? How do you keep your heart open when the one who taught you about goodness used that very goodness to destroy you? For weeks, Kael wandered. He found work where he could, copying letters for merchants, transcribing records for shopkeepers. His exquisite calligraphy earned him enough to survive, but barely. More challenging than poverty, though, was the bitterness that grew in his chest like a dark flower. He found himself watching people with suspicious eyes. When someone was kind, he looked for that hidden motive. When someone smiled, he wondered what they wanted. The betrayal had taught him a lesson he never wanted to learn. People lie. People use. People take your love and twist it into a weapon against you. It was in this state, angry, isolated, wounded, that Kael encountered the old monk. He was sitting by a creek, trying to repair a torn sandal with shaking hands, when a shadow fell across the water. He looked up to see an elderly man in simple robes, with hair white as mountain snow and eyes that seemed to hold entire seasons. "You're hurt?" the old monk observed. Not his foot. Anyone could see the broken sandal, something deeper. "I'm fine," Kael replied, the words automatic as armor. The old monk sat down beside him without invitation, moving slowly, settling into the position like he planned to stay a while. "I once knew a tree," he said conversationally, "that grew on a cliff face. Beautiful tree, strong and graceful, but the soul was thin there, and the winds were harsh. One day, a terrible storm came and split the tree right down the middle." Kael continued working on his sandal, not interested in parables. "The tree could have died," the monk continued. "Should have died, probably, but something interesting happened instead. Where the trunk had split, the tree began to grow differently. The wound became a place where new branches could emerge, branches that grew in directions the tree never could have reached before. The storm revealed something," the old monk said gently. "Not just the tree's weakness, but its extraordinary strength. Its capacity to grow in ways it never knew were possible." Kael's hand stilled on the leather strap. "What if the storm wasn't natural?" he asked quietly. "What if someone deliberately tried to destroy the tree?" The old monk nodded slowly. "Ah, then the tree faces a choice. It can spend its energy wondering why, asking who, seeking revenge against the storm. Or," he paused, watching a leaf float down the creek, "it can put all that energy into becoming the tree it was truly meant to be. But how?" Kael's voice was barely audible. "How do you trust again when trust itself feels like foolishness?" The old monk was quiet for a long moment, listening to the water flow over stones. "Perhaps," he said finally, "the goal isn't to trust blindly again. Perhaps the goal is to trust wisely. The betrayal taught you something valuable: how to see more clearly, how to recognize the difference between genuine love and clever manipulation. That's not damage, that's wisdom." He stood slowly, brushing dust from his robes. "The question isn't whether you can trust again. The question is, what will you do with the clarity you've gained?" Will you use it to close your heart forever, or will you use it to love more skillfully? Before he left, the old monk placed a small, weathered book in Kael's hands. "These are teachings on building sacred spaces," he said. "Not temples made of stone, but temples made of trust, built one careful stone at a time. I think you might find them useful." And then he was gone, leaving Kael alone by the creek with the book and a heart that felt, for the first time in weeks, like it might be able to beat without aching. Kael read the book by firelight that night, and the next night, and the next. The teachings spoke of trust not as blind faith, but as sacred architecture. Trust built with wisdom, reinforced with boundaries, designed with both openness and protection. Trust that could be offered without being naive, received without being desperate. Slowly, carefully, Kael began to rebuild. He found work with a village scribe who needed an assistant. This time, he watched and learned not just the work, but the character of the man he served. He looked for consistency between words and actions. He valued transparency over charm. He chose to trust, but he chose wisely. The scribe proved worthy of that trust, and gradually, Kael began to believe again that goodness existed not everywhere, not in everyone, but in enough places to make hope reasonable. As months passed, people began to seek out Kael's services specifically. His calligraphy was as beautiful as ever, but there was something else now: depth, a gravity, a quality of attention that seemed to transform whatever he wrote. Students began asking if he would teach them. And so, without planning it, Kael found himself becoming what Master Theron had claimed to be, a genuine teacher. He opened a small school in the village, nothing grand or imposing like the mountain temple. Just a simple room with good light and clean brushes and the kind of atmosphere where truth could flourish. He taught calligraphy, yes, but he also taught something more precious: how to discern character, how to build relationships on solid ground, how to offer trust wisely rather than blindly. His students loved him not because he flattered them or made grand promises, but because he saw them clearly and still chose to believe in their potential. He taught them that betrayal, while painful, need not be permanent poison. That broken trust could become the foundation for wiser trust. Years later, news reached the village that Master Theron had been expelled from the mountain temple in disgrace. Apparently, Kael's case had not been isolated. There had been other apprentices framed, other sacred work sold, other lives damaged by the man who had worn the mask of wisdom while serving only himself. When Kael heard this news, he felt, not satisfaction, not vindication, but something quieter and more profound. Sadness for the man who had chosen deception over truth, gratitude for the path that had led him away from the temple and toward his own authentic life, and deep, unshakable certainty that he had made the right choice. He had chosen to let the betrayal break him open rather than shut him down. He had chosen to use his pain as compost for wisdom rather than fuel for bitterness. In the evening, after his students had gone home, Kael would sometimes sit in his simple school and remember the boy who had trusted so completely, so naively. He felt tenderness for that boy, not scorn. That capacity for trust had been beautiful, it had just needed to grow more skillful, more discerning. The betrayal had not destroyed his ability to love, it had refined it. And so Kael learned that his greatest teaching had come not from the temple where he had been welcomed, but from the moment when he was cast out. Not from the man who had claimed to love him, but from his own choice about what to do with that broken love. The betrayal had been real, the pain had been real. But so was his capacity to transform that pain into wisdom, that wound into strength, that ending into a beginning he never could have imagined. Perhaps this is true for all of us who have felt the sharp sting of broken trust. The betrayal is not the end of our story, it's the place where our real story begins. The place where we learn to trust not blindly, but wisely. Not desperately, but skillfully. Not in spite of what we've learned, but because of it. Your broken trust is not evidence of your failure. It's proof of your courage to love in the first place. And that courage, refined by experience, tempered by wisdom, is one of the most beautiful forces in the world. The person who betrayed you may have taught you painful lessons, but you get to choose what you do with those lessons. You get to choose whether they make you smaller or wiser, more closed or more skillfully open. May you find the courage to trust again, not naively, but with the hard-won wisdom that makes trust sacred. May you build relationships that can hold both vulnerability and strength. And may you remember that your capacity to love, even after betrayal, is not your weakness. It's your superpower. Be well, and rest easy.